Welcome back, everybody. My name is Gabby Snyder. I'm joined here by Maeve, who is here with us in video presence, but may not be able to unmute her microphone for a couple of minutes. So, Maeve, if you had to give us a gesture of how you feel right now, let's not do that because we can go ahead and talk about this matchup. I was going to ask for like an interpretive dance or, some sort of movement, but I think it's best we just go ahead and jump into this Group C matchup because let me tell y'all, it is a doozy.
So sorry. I am back.
Oh, you're back. Hello.
Hello. I am sorry. I had the worst timing of a fire alarm going off in my apartment. So that was a quick mute on my part. Very sorry. I was going to do the lead in, Gabby, so I do apologize for whatever it is that I've missed. Very unprofessional of me to set the fire alarm off.
I mean, if we want to talk about fire alarm stories, I've had them go off during job interviews. Like, it could be a lot worse. So I think what we can talk about, though, is the matchup that we have coming up right now, because I think there's going to be a little bit of a fire because it's split. Is that appropriate or is that too soon? If it's too
I think
soon,
it's a little too
down.
soon. My face is still red and I'm still very embarrassed. Like you said, though, this is a very fire set coming up. Thankfully, nothing's on fire in my apartment, so no worries, everybody. I will be fine. This will be a very interesting set here, though. This is between Sweden and South Korea, but they are part of a group that has a three-way tie at the minute. So that group currently, there are a possibility for a three-way tie. So Sweden and South Korea and Singapore could all possibly have 15 match wins at the end of this set, which would be a really interesting thing to see because we would end up having tiebreaker that goes down to the games here. Korea already has the 15 sets won. Singapore also has the 15 sets won. But if Sweden wins today, they will also be at 15 sets and then would go down to all the math of the tiebreakers here based on how many games each team has won individually. So a lot on the line for these teams, and this has been one of the really interesting pools where it's been so evenly matched between these three teams here. So quite a lot to have happen for the outcome of this match.
Definitely. So let's go ahead and take a look at the matches that have already happened this week between Sweden and South Korea, because a lot of the Pokemon that these teams have been using so far this week are really interesting. As you can see, there are a few 2-1 matchups here and there, but the 2-0s seem to be taking a slight advantage on the Korean side of the field. And with the teams they're running, everything looks very on meta, very what you'd expect, minus the Eternatus. And is that a Dawn Wings Necrozma as well?
Yeah, Dawn Wings Necrozma.
A couple of interesting picks there, but overall some fairly metagame compliant, I would say, teams.
Yeah, no worries. Some really interesting stuff here. Dawn Wings Necrozma, like you said, a super interesting choice paired with the Araquanid, which is definitely really helpful when it's facing against Pokemon like that Kyogre and Groudon with that wide guard. And, especially loving to take hits from a Kyogre because of that water bubble ability. Something else I noticed, David Degerman down at the very bottom for Sweden ran a Azumarill, which is something that we haven't seen a whole lot of. There's a Shedinja also on the Sweden side of the field, so they are really playing with fire. I don't know how many more fire jokes I can make until it is a little bit old, but my heart is still racing, so I think it's all right for right now. In these two matches, we have Victor Larsson and Wonseok Jung, so really interesting set here. I know that we have actually from the team preview, whenever we do get to jump into that, I know that Wonseok is also, or one of these two players is also running an Eternatus. So that'll be interesting to see as well. Another slightly off meta choice here for them for what teams they are going to be running.
All right, so let's go ahead and take another look at what teams these trainers will be running. First, we'll be taking a look at Wonseok's team, and as you can see, there is the Eternatus Trainers Cup champion in 21 and qualifying for Worlds 2019 and 4-time Korean League champion. So I'm excited to see how this team's going to play out because the Celesteela we've seen a little bit of this past weekend, but I don't think I've seen an Eternatus for a while.
Yeah, Eternatus is one of those Pokemon that has a really interesting move pool and a really interesting typing, being Dragon Poison. Celesteela is back to doing Celesteela things that it did several years ago. Celesteela had a really interesting move pool use during Dynamax because it was able to set up all those boosts for its partner Pokemon on its side, special defense and defense boosts. So, and even those max airstreams and getting those getting that Tailwind-esque boost here. But Eternatus is one of those Pokemon that I think is going to be a really interesting matchup. It's going to be tough to see, I think, especially in the opponent's team here, because when we do switch, we will set the opponent is running a Zacian, which, even though that fairy typing is really helpful in that steel typing, it's one of those typings where it's not going to do great against a steel fairy type, even with those poison type moves.
No. So if we take a look at Victor Larsson's team, like you mentioned, Maeve, there is going to be that Zacian on the field. But interestingly enough, we're also seeing a Volcarona and a Mandibuzz. And I think Mandibuzz is really a more recent Pokemon in terms of the Series 10 metagame. Gets access to Foul Play, which is a amazing move when you're seeing Calyrexes left and right. Also gets access to Snarl, which can be very helpful against special attackers. Tailwind, Whirlwind, if you're worried about Trick Room. Really a good support Pokemon that's going to come in handy with this matchup. Victor qualifying for Players Cup in Europe for Players Cup 2 and a European Cup finalist in 2019. So this should be a really fun match, as both these trainers have shown that they can make it to this world stage of competition. And with so much on the line for this matchup as well, I can't wait to see how this is going to shake out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see both of these teams. You mentioned the Mandibuzz. Volcarona is a Pokemon I'm really loving right now. I haven't seen it at its full potential in a lot of the matches we've streamed, so I'm really hoping that we'll get to see it doing what it does best, basically being an almost more offensive Amoonguss with access to that Quiver Dance and, just those really great, that Rage Powder, able to take attention away from its partner Pokemon. So it's a Pokemon that I absolutely love, and it does pair well against, a lot of the grass type Pokemon that are in the format, being that Serena or that Rillaboom right now. It might not match up super well against all of the Pokemon here on Wonseok's team, just because, that Celesteela would not like to take that fire damage, but that Urshifu, is pretty comfortable. You can get that Surging Strikes, but then with the Surging Strikes, you do have the fear of Flame Body. So you can handle, if you hit it both all those times with Surging Strikes, there's a really good chance you get that burn from the Flame Body ability that Volcarona really typically runs right now.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind, I think, as we look at this matchup in particular, is just how evenly matched these trainers are in terms of some of the slower options. We see that popular combination of Fire-type Pokemon plus Rillaboom plus Urshifu, and even though I don't remember if we are going to be seeing the same Urshifu facing off against each other, or if one will be single strike and the other will be rapid strike. But still, it should indicate a good slow start to this game. A couple of that's an unfortunate lead for Wonseok, but that Rillaboom and Landorus are sure happy to see the Pokemon they're staring down right now.
Yeah, that Urshifu and the Regieleki here not looking too comfortable in the face of this Landorus Incarnate and this Rillaboom. So a really interesting lead here from Victor, very well matched. He's got that special attack with that Landorus Incarnate, and that Regieleki's fast, but it's not going to be able to do as much damage as it might like to onto both of these Pokemon.
No, and you have to also look at this from a board positioning perspective as well. Wonseok is going to be forced to switch one, if not both, of these Pokemon out immediately at the start of this turn. And if Victor's able to make a good prediction here and maybe double target what we now know is an Incineroar, that could certainly give him a momentum advantage immediately for turn one.
Yeah, like you said, that Incineroar does swap in for that Urshifu here, and we are going to see a Protect coming out from the Regieleki this turn, so not going to be taking any damage here. The Rillaboom, though, goes for a Fake Out into the Incineroar spot that just switched in. It is going to be a critical hit as well, I believe, and so then that Fake Out there, and then a move here from this Landorus is not going to make contact with this Regieleki. I do have to assume it was something like an Earth Power here. Sadly, I don't read
probably.
Korean.
I think it's safe to assume the Earth Power. Again, the Landorus in the incarnate form does love to run those special moves, and Earth Power is really the best move that it has available to it. Honestly, what surprised me a bit more is it looks like that Regieleki also knows a Water-type move, which, if I'm reading the Pokedex correctly, could only be Rain Dance. So that's something really interesting that we could possibly see come into play later. But for now, I think, again, this game's going to start off slow. There's going to be a lot of repositioning, but sending out a Poison-type Pokemon into a slot that just possibly got an Earth Power could have been a very risky play.
Yeah, but that fake out from the Incineroar into the Landorus is going to prevent that from happening, while a U-turn from the Rillaboom into the Eternatus is going to reposition some Pokemon on Victor's side of the field as well. You know, not having to worry now about that Regieleki taking a move like an Earth Power by having that Incineroar swap in is definitely very useful. This is possibly the Zacian here, though, which it is, because now that the Incineroar is on the field, it is not going to be taking any Intimidates, and that Intrepid Sword boost will allow it to boost its attack that one extra stage.
If that Zacian has access to close combat, Incineroar is really going to struggle to stay on the field. Pair that with still the threat of the Earth Power from the opposing Landorus Incarnate. Wonseok is again in a position where they're going to be forced to adjust, and I feel like even though these trainers are both switching their Pokemon around pretty freely at the start of this game, Victor seems to always maintain the advantage, at least typing-wise on the field, pressure-wise on the field. And until Wonseok finds a way to sort of break this pattern, possibly by removing that Landorus entirely from the field with some damage or a hit or two from whatever Pokemon he can get into position, Victor is going to keep sort of coming out on top of these switch turns.
Yeah, Regieleki actually switches in with a hard switch for that Incineroar, does get hit by a close combat from that Zacian, knocking it down to its Focus Sash while there was a Protect from the Eternatus slot. However, if this Landorus targeted any of these into that Regieleki slot, he is going to be much more comfortable. Instead, though, possibly goes for that Earth Power into the Eternatus, so it does not do any damage there. And this at least allows that Incineroar to switch in and out, as a lot of positioning games revolve around Zacian and that Intrepid Sword.
Exactly. And I think even if Victor was able to predict the Incineroar switching out there and the appearance of the Regieleki, I don't think you necessarily make the double target there, because the Eternatus is such a threat. You know, it is in the sort of league, if you will, as the Zacian is in terms of how much damage it can do, the beneficial typing against the Pokemon, against Rillaboom, possibly even other Pokemon in the back of Victor's party. So you just keep that Landorus on the field and you keep using those Earth Powers, because eventually something's going to have to switch in that slot, or the Eternatus will go on the offensive, and at that point in time, that Earth Power honestly is a fantastic attack no matter what.
Yeah, actually we get the Zacian switching out here for the Rillaboom, and the Eternatus also switches out, bringing that Incineroar back in, getting an Intimidate off onto the Rillaboom on the opposing side, and getting fake out pressure on for both sides of the field here with that Rillaboom and that Incineroar. And we do actually see here the Electro Web, I believe, was a miss here onto one of these two, or not effective onto that Landorus. Does slow down that Rillaboom here, though, so that is going to do a really nice job of slowing down the field a little bit for him. But the Earth Power into that Incineroar slot is enough to get the knockout here. So that Incineroar came in, got one Intimidate off, but wasn't able to get the fake out, and that means that Zacian's going to be in a really great position moving forward.
Zacian's going to be in a great position. Rillaboom's in a great position. Landorus Incarnate continues to just sit on the field and, you know, not really be too threatened by anything that Wonseok can bring. That knockout there was crucial. That Landorus Incarnate has been such a problem for Wonseok, just given that Regieleki is the only Pokemon seemingly that outspeeds it. And can't even damage it despite all that trouble. He does have one opportunity here to reveal his final Pokemon and try and get a competitive advantage once again against this Landorus, but with Regieleki at such low health and that Rillaboom having access to grassy terrain, you have to wonder if that Pokemon's just going to get knocked out immediately for its trouble.
Yeah, Regieleki swaps out here, though, brings in that Urshifu. Eternatus goes for another Protect here. We haven't seen a single move come out from this Urshifu here. A Grassy Glide, though, from the Rillaboom into that Urshifu slot does a really good chunk of damage, well over half. And then the Eternatus here is protected from another Earth Power. So this Eternatus hasn't taken really any damage, but also hasn't put out any damage either.
And that's ultimately why Victor has been really in a commanding position this entire game. Wonseok keeps trying to find this magical board position that I don't really think exists for him in this matchup, where well, we know it's a choice scarf for Shifu Rapid Strike because we can see his perspective, but Victor doesn't necessarily know that it is holding that choice scarf item. But with the Rillaboom on the field and previously having access to grassy terrain, that was one thing that he had to worry about. He's going to have one turn to go for that Rapid Strike, or that Surging Strike attack into the Landorus to pick up that knockout, Sludge Bomb to connect with the Rillaboom to pick up that knockout. But then you're locked into Surging Strikes against Zacian, which is not really a optimal move. So Victor just keeping that momentum going, keeping that revolving door Pokemon spinning, and just making some very good defensive plays.
Yeah, and here is that Surging Strikes. Like you said, this probably, and it does go into that Zacian slot, which was at one point the Landorus Incarnate here. It will still do a pretty hefty chunk of damage, especially for switching in hard to that move here. And then we do see the Eternatus finally goes for a move here. It is in fact a Flamethrower, which is very interesting. So it does a really nice amount of damage to that Rillaboom, but not enough to knock it out here. So seeing Flamethrower over Sludge Bomb is a really interesting choice, while a U-turn comes out, does a really small amount of damage, but most importantly, is going to reposition, is going to allow that Landorus possibly back on the field, or whatever this fourth Pokemon is that Victor has that just hasn't been revealed to us yet.
I think you send in your last Pokemon and you keep the Landorus safe in the back of your party because you know by now that the Urshifu is going to be faster than the Eternatus. I think that's enough of a tell to realize you have to be careful when it comes to, how the Landorus and the Urshifu will pair up in terms of speed. And if you do send in the Landorus, I think you just immediately recall it. The Rillaboom in the back of Victor's party will take a Surging Strikes way better than the Zacian or the Landorus, and that the Zacian can hopefully connect an attack here this turn as well. It's amazing that Wonseok has been able to put this pressure on, even though he did take that damage onto the Urshifu when it switched in. And I think that's something he has to keep in mind in game 2, because it seems like Victor is really comfortable with this revolving door Pokemon strategy, and if you keep calling those switches and sending in Pokemon that can also possibly get a burn for their trouble, I mean, that's something you just gotta be careful about.
This was a really interesting play. Wonseok actually goes for that Surging Strikes into the Zacian again, getting that knockout after 2 of the hits there. The Volcarona, though, swapped in for the Landorus, and we are going to see, excuse me, from Eternatus, this is the Meteor Beam, I believe?
No, that was Eternatus's signature attack.
Oh, the Dynamax Cannon.
Dynamax Cannon. Or Eternabeam.
Yeah, a Dynamax Cannon from the Eternatus here, I believe, into that Volcarona. Gets it down to under half, but then the Volcarona eats its berry and gains some health back here.
So I think what Victor was hoping for is that the Urshifu would have targeted the Volcarona's spot, so that way he would have had possibly 3 opportunities to land a burn on that Urshifu, which would have sealed the deal. Now that the Rillaboom is back out onto the field, though, and bringing with it the grassy terrain, a Grassy Glide will pick up the knockout on that Urshifu, guaranteed. It cannot protect. It is locked into an attack. Volcarona has a couple of turns to try and find some damage onto the Eternatus. Possibly a Rage Powder could also help out here to keep that Rillaboom safe for a couple of turns. But it's a tough spot, and I really like how Wonseok has been just keeping the pressure consistently on Victor. This is sort of one of those strategies, or this is one of those situations where you see the slow play sort of contrasted with this really offensive sort of back for Wonseok, a really offensive endgame. And it's curious to see how this is going to play out. I'm not even sure if Victor can really damage the Eternatus at this point.
Yeah, that Rillaboom though is able to knock out the Urshifu there with a Grassy Glide, but then immediately takes a Sludge Bomb here for its troubles and is knocked out by this Eternatus itself. So now you have the Volcarona here. It goes for a struggle bug there, I believe. That struggle bug there that does lower the stats, but then you do see actually one thing I didn't pick up earlier is this Eternatus is holding Black Sludge, which means it's not holding that Power Herb, which means it's not probably running Meteor Beam, which is possibly why that Flamethrower was chosen over that move, just to get some extra coverage here. And now Wonseok will bring out his last Pokemon, who is that Regieleki that is at a very low percentage of health here, while Victor brings out that Landorus Incarnate, who is very happy to be here still.
Yeah, I think Wonseok was hoping that the Urshifu would have not been knocked out that turn, so that Regieleki would be KO'd instead. Urshifu comes back out onto the field, gets an opportunity to pick a new attack. Unfortunately, again, this Landorus really is the threat for Wonseok, and it seemed like he was able to find an opening there as long as the Landorus wasn't on the field, which is something interesting for him to consider going into Game 2. But for now, I believe Victor is just 2 Earth Powers away from winning this Game 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see another Dynamax cannon here. This is going to go into the Landorus Incarnate slot. Does a ton of damage, but is not enough to get that knockout. So it is still taking that damage here from itself, and that is a massive amount here. And it does take that Earth Power for its troubles. Is enough to knock it out here. A ton of damage, though, and not having any real output power from this Regieleki really means that Wonseok's in a tough spot. So that makes it a really tough spot for him to go forward. He can't damage this Landorus, like you said. If it is that Rain Dance from your reading of the Pokedex, that's going to make it pretty tough.
It has to be, because that's literally the only water type move that Regieleki can learn. And I honestly forget it can learn that. You think that people would consider running it maybe alongside some of these Kyogre teams instead of a no weather Eternatus team, but you know, here we are, and that's the matchup that we got. So Landorus Incarnate really being public enemy number 1 for this matchup, and going into Game 2, I think Wonseok has to be very careful about how he lets that Landorus's presence on the field influence his plays. Admittedly, you know, had the right idea as a lead going for that Urshifu next to the Regieleki. It was really unfortunate that the Grassy Glide pressure from Rillaboom was enough to make that not really feasible anymore, but still, I think you just bring the same Pokemon if you're Wonseok. Bring the Eternatus in the back, bring the Urshifu in the back, and just try and, you know, line up your play with your opponent so that you're trying to deal the damage on the turn when your opponent is forced to switch, because that's what Victor was doing fairly consistently throughout that Game 1, and it really did add up to a significant advantage by the time Landorus did come back out onto the field and it was stuck there.
Yeah, and that lead, of course, really meant that it was a very slow beginning, like you said, so there was a lot of maneuvering, and even though Wonseok put himself in a much better position towards the end, I think having those consistent turns of switching and protecting and not getting enough damage output early on to take care of the Pokemon later in the game was tough, and you know, that's a tough board position to move and come back from, so it's something he'll have to be mindful of in the future, I'm sure, as well. Just depending on, you know, that Regieleki is not loving the Landorus Incarnate. It's still a good Pokemon for a lot. You know, it's still a good Pokemon for that matchup. It's just, you know, when you have a tough board position and a Pokemon that is a Glass Cannon, that can live 1 attack with that Focus Sash, but, you know, it's not going to live 2 of really almost any attack because it is so frail. You know, even a U-turn does like 50% sometimes to that Pokemon there. We do see the leads, though. It is that Landorus Incarnate and the Zacian this turn, though, and then the Incineroar and the Rillaboom on Wonseok's side, so definitely a different lead, but I do not mind it.
The adjustment here from both trainers, I think they were thinking the right thing. The only question that I have is that what Pokemon did Victor bring in the back? Because with the Intimidate out on the field already from that Incineroar, I find it very likely that Zacian won't be sticking around for long. A great adjustment, though. Now Wonseok has access to Fake Out. He has access to priority attacks from that Rillaboom and is really in a much different position where, yes, an Earth Power from this Landorus Incarnate would be unfortunate, but at the same time, you do have more of a way to threaten it immediately. And it looks like he also brought the Urshifu and the Eternatus in the back as well. So this is going to be a much different game from his perspective. I think that he can take the opportunity this turn to go for a switch, try and get the Eternatus on the field, and then go for a Dynamax Cannon to knock out the Landorus this time. Struggle Bug lowers the special attack of its targets by 1 stage, so that definitely came into play in game 1 against this Landorus Incarnate, and without that, I think it just threatens a knockout.
Yeah, the Zacian actually, the Incineroar there switches out for that Eternatus while the Landorus Incarnate goes for a Protect here. It is not going to be taking any damage from this Rillaboom that most likely went for that Fake Out that turn. And the Zacian there, of course, just sitting pretty comfortably, didn't take any damage.
It didn't, and the fact that Eternatus was able to switch in that turn comfortably with the help of the Fake Out is a huge difference already at the beginning of game 1. Eternatus and Zacian have a bit of a weird matchup here, where thanks to the Flamethrower on the Eternatus, it will be able to deal decent damage to Zacian that it wouldn't be able to find otherwise. And we know that Dynamax Cannon will threaten a knockout on the Landorus, and that's going to be key in considering how this turn plays out. What we don't know, though, is what other Pokemon Victor has in the back, and consequently, how much damage they're going to take upon switching in.
Actually, yeah, there is going to be that Volcarona switching in for the Landorus, who takes a Grassy Glide very comfortably, but does get the Flame Body burn onto this Rillaboom, so that is absolutely huge to mitigate the damage output of this Rillaboom. While we see here from Zacian the Behemoth Blade, and that is going to go into the Rillaboom slot as well. That does a really good chunk of damage, brings it down to under half of its HP, so this Rillaboom now is not going to be sitting comfortably, while this Dynamax Beam from this Dynamax Cannon from this Eternatus here is going to do a really good amount of damage onto this Volcarona. It is not enough to knock it out, but gets it into the bottom 25% of its HP.
And also activates the berry as well. So Volcarona comfortably going to stick around for one more turn, could go for another Struggle Bug, could go for a Rage Powder, can also get some more health back from the grassy terrain. You know, Volcarona is in a very happy position here. On the other hand, Wonseok is forced to switch out that Rillaboom if he doesn't want to lose it this turn. And that's a tough call. I mean, I think the switch into Incineroar here is good because you will intimidate the opposing Zacian, and that is going to force the Zacian out of the field as well. You also have to realize that now that the Rillaboom has been burned, there's really only so much it can do damage-wise, and I think that the utility of having access to multiple fake-outs at this point is more important than being able to deal what would probably be like 20 HP worth of damage from a Grassy Glide onto either of these two Pokemon.
Yeah, absolutely. The switch here, though, is going to bring in the Incineroar in place of that Rillaboom that did handle that burn at that last turn, does get that Intimidate off into the Zacian most importantly, and have Fake Out pressure on that next turn. And it can pretty comfortably take something from this Volcarona, but we see another Behemoth Blade from the Zacian, who feels pretty comfortable to fire these off into that Eternatus, but that Intimidate is so important as it doesn't even do half of the HP of that Eternatus slot, who is then going to go for another Sludge Bomb into this Volcarona, gets a critical hit and gets the knockout, which is absolutely huge, because this Volcarona getting those Struggle Bugs off onto that Eternatus and lowering the special attack would have been really detrimental for the position of the Xerneas going forward.
Oh, definitely. But I also think that the Volcarona had taken so much damage at that point that the Eternatus was guaranteed to pick up that KO, really regardless of what move it used. But good information to get that like on paper, especially if we get down to a game 3, because the Volcarona is really the only Pokemon on Victor's side of the field that we've seen so far that can act as that bulky pivot. And when you're playing a team that needs these pivots to drop the Intimidates to, help reposition your Pokemon, losing that bulky pivot is always going to make it so much harder moving forwards. Victor does have access to a possible Fake Out here, could double into the Eternatus if he wants to try and go for that KO, though I think it's going to be a bit of a tall ask for a Behemoth Blade at this point. Could also try and target down the opposing Incineroar and keep Zacian on the field, get a close combat in, plus something else to try and make sure that you wouldn't have to worry about more Intimidates moving forwards. And also try and find an opening for a Landorus to make a reappearance. And That's really, I think it's only the Eternatus that's keeping the Landorus off the field right now. So it may seem a little counterintuitive, but if you can remove the Incineroar, I think you actually have an easier time of dealing with the Eternatus, and then you can sort of use that for your opening for the end game.
Yeah, Zacian switches out here, though, bringing that Landorus on, but Incineroar is also going to switch out, so a nice switch there, able to reposition, brings that Rillaboom, and that Rillaboom, of course, is burned, so it's not going to be doing nearly as much damage, and it does take that Fake Out from Victor's Rillaboom, so Rillaboom there, really a nice switch in, doesn't have to deal with Fake Out, but we see the Flamethrower onto the Landorus, which does really a nice amount of damage here from this Eternatus, even though it is not super, it is, you know, at that kind of neutral damage right there.
And that just goes to show you how high Eternatus' special attack is as well. I mean, 145 isn't something to shake a stick at, so to speak. Or maybe shake the ground. I don't know. There was a pun there. I could have gone for it. Failed in execution. That one's on me. But still, a great spot for Wonseok to prioritize getting rid of that Landorus this turn. And with that Pokemon gone, this matchup will be so much easier for him to bring it to Game 3.
Yeah, the Landorus, though, protects, so it's not going to be taking any damage this time. Was going to possibly take a Fake Out there. The Rillaboom on Wonseok's side does get knocked out here from the Rillaboom on Victor's side from a U-turn, so that Rillaboom is going to be switching back, bringing that Zacian back out, as that's the last Pokemon left on Victor's side. So now Wonseok is going to be able to bring his Incineroar in as well, which will stop that Intrepid Sword boost with that Intimidate and still put Fake Out pressure back on the field, even though the Rillaboom was knocked out.
And Intrepid Sword also coming into play again for Victor, and I think that forces Wonseok to send in the Incineroar here just to make sure that you don't let it keep that attack boost. I mean, we also have the benefit of knowing that his last Pokemon is going to be that Urshifu with the Choice Scarf once again, and I don't think you want to send that Pokemon in on this position quite yet either. So take the Intimidate, take the Fake Out, maybe take a Parting Shot, and then that will allow you to switch in that Urshifu essentially for free, as both the Landorus and the Zacian are going to be faster than this Incineroar, and unless they double into it, really struggle to find that knockout.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, you know, because that Landorus did protect last turn, it is susceptible to taking a Fake Out. So it could be something that could be really problematic for it, you know, dealing with getting a Fake Out. And then, like you said, it would be easier to possibly double target into, it would be not as... double targeting into that Zacian might not be the smartest of choices. The Landorus, though, switches out here, brings in that Rillaboom, so if that Rillaboom does get faked out, that is going to be nice. Gets that grassy terrain back up on the field, so it will get that slow healing over time for the next several turns. We do see the Rillaboom, the Zacian here goes for a Protect, so the Zacian also not going to be taking any damage. The Fake Out, though, goes into the protected Zacian, so once again, a really nice play, mitigating that damage. But a Flamethrower from the Eternatus goes into the slot where the Landorus was, which is now that Incineroar, does a really nice amount of damage, gets it down to almost a quarter of its HP.
So definitely confirmation of Assault Vest for the opposing Rillaboom there, which is great information to go into Game 3 with, as it appears that's what we're going to be moving towards, at least slowly. And I really... It's an interesting spot because, you know, you would think that with Zacian at full health and with Victor having the ability to switch it back out off the field and back onto the field at least one more time, that Zacian would be able to take things from here. I think as long as Wonseok saves that Incineroar, switches it out so that if Victor does switch out the Zacian, the Incineroar can come right back in. I think that he'll have a pretty comfortable win condition from there on out.
Yeah, the Incineroar, though, switches out for the Urshifu, and Eternatus goes for a Protect. The Rillaboom here goes for a Grassy Glide, most likely, into that Eternatus, which does Protect here, while a close combat from the Zacian into the Urshifu takes it just to above half of its HP, but it does drop the Defense and Special Defense on that Zacian, which is not going to love taking an attack next turn, so it may be comfortable switching out here, getting that Intrepid Sword boost again, and removing those Defense and Special Defense drops.
Yeah, and I think, though, on top of that, the Rillaboom is in a perfect position to go for a Grassy Glide. It looks like, based off the damage we saw in Game 1, that that Urshifu is within knockout range from a Grassy Glide, so you have to wonder if Wonseok's gonna let the Rillaboom take that knockout, or if he's gonna go ahead and switch in the Incineroar at this point in time. I think it's a tough call because, again, it all comes down to what you think the Zacian's going to do, and do you think it's going to stay on the field? Do you think it's going to switch out? The timing of that and the timing of when you bring the Incineroar back into play is really key here. But as long as Wonseok is able to keep the Intimidate pressure down onto the Zacian, I still think that he's in the best position to take this and force a game 3.
Yeah, and that Intimidate pressure, like you said, from this Incineroar is enough, gets launched out again in place for that Urshifu. Another Grassy Glide, though, into the slot for the Eternatus does very little damage. Zacian goes for that Behemoth Blade into either of the two Pokemon on Wonseok's side. It is the Eternatus here, so that still does really not as much damage as it would have liked to after taking several Intimidates here. The Eternatus goes for a Flamethrower into the Rillaboom slot here, is enough to knock that Rillaboom out, so that will mean that this Eternatus is not going to have to worry about any more Pokemon cycling in and out, but it is still going to have to deal with that Landorus Incarnate in the back. As long as they can handle it, you know, they still have that Urshifu in the back, but it is at half of its health and it won't have to worry about a Grassy Glide.
Exactly. I'm very surprised that Victor left the Zacian on the field in that position. I think that the Behemoth Blade was a nice idea in theory, but because it had been so weakened at that point, it just unfortunately was not able to do the damage it needed to make that play, I think, as optimal as Victor would have liked it to be. Now Zacian stuck on the field with the Intimidate, with the defense and the special defense drop. Does have the element of speed on its side. It should be able to get one more attack in, and if you're already out of weakened defenses, what's another close combat going to be? But because the Eternatus will be able to pick up the KO onto the Landorus, assuming it can connect an attack, I think that, again, I really think we're going to be seeing a game 3 here. Wonseok has just done a fantastic job of adjusting to the playstyle he saw in game 1 and leaving this Zacian in a really tough spot.
Yeah, actually swaps that Incineroar out again while he does handle a protect. The Landorus here goes for a protect while the Urshifu comes back in for what that Incineroar was. That Zacian is going for another Behemoth Blade. You know, with that several attack drops here, it's not going to be doing as much damage, but it is enough to finally knock out that Eternatus. So this will bring the Incineroar back in, get another Intimidate off. So this puts Wonseok in a really great position because, you know, he can still go for Surging Strikes into that Landorus. We did see that it is Choice Scarf, so that it is going to be very powerful and fast. But this Incineroar is making sure that the Zacian isn't able to really output any damage that's going to be critical here. And making sure that by having this fake out pressure for the next turn as well, it can be something that will very comfortably wrap up the game here.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to lock in your win position at this point in time is use Fake Out to ensure you can force a 2v1 next turn. And then you have the faster Surging Strikes, and then you have the Flare Blitz that may or may not get a knockout at -1 defense. And that's how you get a game 3. So, you know, at this point in time, you really got to think, if you're both these trainers, how do I make adjustments based off what I saw in these first 2 games? Because I think that Wonseok was able to find an opening in this game 2 using Victor's slow play against him, and that's something Victor's going to have to patch up moving forwards.
Yeah, a fake out into Zacian means that Zacian's not going to move, but one single Surging Strike into that Landorus is enough to take it out with the remaining HP that it had. So, I mean, one fire type move here into this Zacian, and you know, it's not going to be able to fire off nearly as much damage as it's being dealt. We saw that Surging Strikes did pretty much half of the HP that Zacian had at regular defense. So if it is, you know, if it is having to deal with that minus defense drop from that close combat, it's going to be in a tougher position. It's not going to be able to handle either of these attacks too well.
That's absolutely right. And, you know, something else to keep in mind as we watch this game wrap up is that, you know, with forcing a game 3, Victor has put himself in a situation where he really has to contend with the fact that if he loses the next game, Sweden's most likely not going to make it to the next round of this tournament. Going into this match, again, just as a little refresher, because I had to look it up myself, if South Korea wins this next game and wins the set, then they will be moving on into the next round. If Sweden wins, then they force this tiebreaker scenario where we have to look at the number of games which were won by each of the countries in question and figure out who wins from that way. So really, the entirety of Sweden's tournament life is in Victor's hands, and you really got to take your time. No, no pressure, no pressure. I mean, they already played, right? So no pressure. But I really want to see how he's going to adjust his play style, knowing that this might be time to sort of switch to that more conservative play that we saw him able to pull off in game one, not quite able to match in game two, so that you're just taking things as safely as you can.
Yeah, and I loved the play of leaving the Regieleki behind. I think that was absolutely huge by having, that extra output from the Urshifu who can, handle some of those Pokemon a little bit better, personally. I think that made it a little bit of an easier game plan, not worrying so much about swapping in a Regieleki who can't take a hit.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And the other thing you have to keep in mind about Regieleki in this matchup as well is that thanks to the Rillaboom and the Landorus, which we saw in both games from Victor, it's not really the best Pokemon to bring. It's fast, and those Thunderbolts are fantastic when they hit, but with so many Pokemon able to comfortably maneuver around that, I think you just leave Regieleki behind and rely on someone like the Incineroar and the Rillaboom to bring that consistent damage threat.
Yeah, and like you said, Incineroar and Rillaboom, the lead here for Wonseok, but we also have the Rillaboom and the Landorus Incarnate here for Victor. So, some Pokemon that we've already seen a whole lot of this game, getting that Intimidate and that Fake Out pressure, like we've said probably a dozen times now, just by having that really nice lead. It is something that, that Landorus is a Pokemon that's been really problematic for Wonseok.
It has been, but unlike in game one when he was staring down this lead, I think that he has more tools that make switching here a bit more pleasant, if you will, to try and remove the Landorus from the field. And again, given how much trouble this Pokemon has caused him throughout games 1 and 2, I'm not surprised to see that Urshifu making an appearance, possibly hoping for a quick knockout.
Yeah, it does get faked out, though, on that switch in while the fake out from the Incineroar goes into the Landorus. So just trading fake outs here, just getting that little small amount of damage, but nothing else really coming from that turn. And a great switch in as well because of that Rillaboom, because switching in that Urshifu meant that it's not really going to worry about taking that fake out. It's not like it had anything really to do that turn anyway besides join the field.
Still have to worry about Grassy Glide, but from what we saw in game 1, barring a critical hit, I think that Urshifu is free to go for a attack this turn if Wonseok decides to do so. Victor, I think, as a result, going to be forced to switch out this Landorus to try and give it a better board position later on to threaten the other Pokemon on Wonseok's team. The Urshifu really is the Pokemon that shuts down Landorus, and as a result, you have to be careful on both sides. You have to protect the Landorus, but you gotta protect your Urshifu as well.
Yeah, Urshifu switches out for that Rillaboom again, but the Landorus also switches out here and is going to bring in the Mandibuzz, who we haven't seen yet, which is a really interesting switch up here. The Rillaboom on Victor's side also switches out, is going to bring in that Zacian, so the only Pokemon that's going to be doing anything this turn is that Incineroar, so it's going to be interesting to see exactly which Pokemon he targets here. Is going to actually go for a parting shot into the Zacian, which is great because that Zacian's Intrepid Sword Boost is now null and void.
And, we've spent so much time talking about speed control, not in the traditional sense, but just in, how much pressure that this Choice Scarfed Urshifu puts on the field for Wonseok. Bringing Mandibuzz most likely means you're bringing Tailwind, and after a Tailwind, I don't think the Landorus nor the Zacian have to worry as much about the Choice Scarf. Will take a turn to set up, unlike some of the other Tailwind users popular in Series 10. Mandibuzz does not get access to Prankster, instead most likely has Overcoat as its ability, which could also come in handy, but not necessarily in this matchup. But it's protecting your partner Pokemon for a turn to get Tailwind onto the field is certainly a strategy that Victor can go for here. The Eternatus is guaranteed to pick up a knockout on the Zacian in about 2 turns, thanks to how much damage we saw Flamethrower do previously, and both these Pokemon are really going to struggle to deal damage to that Mandibuzz as well. Even a Dynamax Cannon, given how especially bulky Mandibuzz usually is trained, won't pick up that knockout.
Yeah, Zacian switches out here after dealing with that parting shot. The Rillaboom instead coming in for Victor. Eternatus also swapping out here, probably going to bring back in that Incineroar, which Wonseok does. Again, get Intimidate, again, get Fake Out on the field. I've said it probably 100 times today, and I will probably say it 100 more. Just based on how these positioning battles really factor in. A U-turn here from the Rillaboom on Wonseok's side does enough, like a smaller amount of damage onto that Mandibuzz, but it's still a pretty hefty amount. Nice to get that chip in there. And we'll bring back out that Eternatus on his side, so just repositioning once again. And that's the way these Asian games are played, you know, it's always cycling. Who has Fake Out? Who has Intrepid Sword? Who has Intimidate? What's going on?
I mean, it's funny that you bring this up because I think that we're bound to see another match like that for our final match of the day, but it's really a good commentary on where we are in terms of the Series 10 metagame right now. What I find interesting is that it feels like it's very much a carryover from Players' Cup 4, where we did see a lot of this Intimidate, parting shot, U-turn, Intimidate, parting shot, U-turn, Fake Out. You know, again and again and again and again as both trainers search for a board position. And, you know, it can't be said enough. That is such a tiring style of game to play. Even though these games aren't necessarily getting to the game timer, I think that maintaining an idea of what the board position is relative to, you know, what your win conditions are and like the 5 moves you need to make in order to get there, knowing how your opponent's going to respond, is really something that's really important to learn how to play if you are going to be playing at a higher level, but also really, really difficult, even in the moment. You know, no matter how much you practice, fatigue is a thing. And I'm curious to see how the remainder of this game is going to play out, just knowing how critical these slow turns are. I mean, we've even seen this Mandibuzz go for Snarl so that Eternatus is not going to be as offensive as it once was.
Yeah, that Eternatus did protect through that Snarl, so an interesting C here, but we do get the knockoff from the Rillaboom. That is going to knock off the Life Orb that Eternatus has been carrying, and then another Snarl as well. Going to drop the special attack here on that Eternatus and on that Incineroar, who's not going to worry too much about a special attack drop. That's not really its thing. Eternatus, though, does go for a Sludge Bomb, does very little damage onto this Mandibuzz, and then once again, another parting shot from this Incineroar into the Rillaboom on Victor's side, and that is going to send back that Incineroar once again, cycling it all out. You know, you say that revolving door of Pokemon joke that we've heard for years and years and years, and it's still so prevalent today. You know, bringing this Rillaboom back in, who we know has access to U-turn, who also gets Fake Out, who can then switch in and out. So that's the tough thing about playing against these Zacian teams I've really seen, is the amount of positioning you need to do just to make sure you stay in the game and just stay on top of it. And also that grassy terrain does end this turn.
I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but it always makes me happy that the line, it's a revolving door of Pokemon from Pokemon Stadium of all places, the N64 game, is so relevant in this metagame to this day. Like, it's just one of those things that I don't think the game writers or localizers or who have you realized was like such an apt comment on what these double meta games really boil down to once you do see this level of mastery. But it's very topical. It makes me very happy. Go play Stadium minigames. Maybe after this match.
Victor's Rillaboom goes for a U-turn. Eternatus swapped out for the Urshifu here, which is really, I think, the only good answer that Wonseok has to this Mandibuzz, especially if it's carrying a move like Roost. You know what? It has a way to heal itself. The Zacian switches in, though, for Victor, once again getting that Intrepid Sword boost that it likes to have out on the field when it's not dealing with an Incineroar. Here is the Roost, though, from that Mandibuzz, so that is going to heal it all the way back up to full health. So Wonseok's really going to have to struggle if he can't get special attack boosts because of Snarl, and then a U-turn as well from this Rillaboom into the Zacian. But if he can't get those special attack boosts because of Snarl, you know, just lowering the special attack, he's not going to be able to output enough damage to be offsetting what the Roost is healing up.
Fortunately for Wonseok, though, both the Urshifu and the Incineroar will attack on the physical side of things, so Snarl isn't as big of a deterrent this turn compared to previous turns. Also, looks like Tailwind just ran out as well, so this Urshifu should have the opportunity to attack faster than the Zacian, at least for one turn. I think if you're in Wonseok's shoes, you just have to go for the damage into the partner Pokemon at this point in time, because you know that any damage is going to struggle to stick to that Mandibuzz. That all being said, you know, Protect Tailwind is a very good play, but it doesn't look like Victor went for it.
Yeah, instead that Surging Strikes here onto the Zacian is going to still do so much damage. We saw it do well over half in game 1. We saw it do even more with that defense drop from game 2, so it's really nice to get all of that damage out onto the Zacian, who then goes for a Play Rough into this Urshifu, so secretly carrying that Play Rough as that extra move on that Zacian that we're seeing run so much more now, and then the Tailwind comes out from the Mandibuzz. So, you know, the Zacian takes a little bit of damage, but now it removes the answer for this Mandibuzz, and now this Zacian, you know, it does get knocked out from this Flare Blitz, but you really are going to struggle to take this Mandibuzz out now.
I don't think it's really even the Mandibuzz that you have to worry about still. The Pokemon that's still in the back of Victor's party is that Landorus, and like we've established already, it really is the Urshifu that Wonseok has to rely to get those knockouts. To his credit, he still does have Rillaboom, will be bringing with it the grassy terrain, will get access to priority Grassy Glide once again. We've all been there, we've seen this game hopefully up until now, but the big question is, how much damage will Grassy Glide do to the Landorus? I don't think we've seen this play out. I think that it's not guaranteed to be a knockout. Even after possibly a Fake Out and a Flare Blitz combination from Wonseok. And that's not even considering the fact that Victor, if he recognizes just how much value this Landorus still has in this matchup, he could switch it out and use the Mandibuzz, get a little more chip damage down, and save the Landorus for when the Rillaboom isn't as much of a threat. It's still a very close game, and it still comes down to these board positions, and it's still going to come down to the slow play as well, it looks like.
Yeah, we do see the Protect here, which is going to block that Fake Out, and then this Mandibuzz is going to go for, I am so sorry, I physically cannot remember the name. Foul Play, thank you. And then another move into that Landorus, so that double target here from Wonseok does not pay off because Victor very smartly protected that Landorus this turn.
And knowing that Mandibuzz has Foul Play was the last piece of the puzzle that I think Wonseok and Victor needed in order to figure out how this game is going to play out. The Landorus can simply switch this turn. Victor, unfortunately, will lose his last Pokemon as a result. Foul Play into the Rillaboom to knock it out, and then Landorus comes back out onto the field, and that is game. And this is why Mandibuzz has also been picking up in popularity. The really cool thing about Foul Play, granted, Mandibuzz isn't necessarily the only Pokemon that gets it. Grimmsnarl also can get access to a same type attack boosted Foul Play that's pretty nasty. But you use your opponent's attack against them when calculating how much damage it's going to do. So you can, you know, invest in HP, you can invest in defenses, and then really take advantage of how your Pokemon on the opposing side of the field are trained when it comes to how much damage you're going to be dealing.
Yeah, another Foul Play here from this Mandibuzz will be enough to knock out that Rillaboom, while the Earth Power from that Landorus Incarnate was very comfortably enough to knock out that Incineroar. That means it is Eternatus versus the world here with Victor's Pokemon, and it is not going to love taking an Earth Power from that Landorus. We know how strong it is. We know that this Eternatus, without any help from a Fake Out or anything, especially with Tailwind on Victor's side, this is going to be a very easy wrap-up, and this means that it will be that tiebreaker with the 3 teams at 15 match wins, Gabby.
That is very exciting. It really coming down to the wire. I took a little peek at the matchups earlier, and it does seem like South Korea does have an advantage in terms of games won over Sweden, but you know, there is still Singapore to take into consideration for this group as well. So we'll have to wait for the official tally to kick in, but very well played for both these trainers. Just really solid positioning play And Victor, again, just keeping that Landorus safe no matter what to ensure the win.
Yeah, we get the Protect here from Eternatus, possibly trying to stall out the rest of this Tailwind. Whatever move this Mandibuzz was, you maybe assume that it is something like a Rock Slide. If it is carrying a Rock-type move, does not hit this Eternatus here. Foul Play may not matter all that much because Eternatus is a special attacker, and it is that Poison typing as well.
Yep. But at the end of the day, you still also have access to Snarl, and if you wanted to do like maybe half as much damage as you did in that previous turn, and get the special attack drop, that's available as well. But Mandibuzz just unfortunate, or maybe fortunately, I don't think the damage at that point from Mandibuzz really mattered, as it did come down to those last Pokemon remaining, and the Landorus being safe to come back out onto the field eventually, whenever it felt like it, to win that game for Victor. So very well played, and congratulations to Sweden for forcing the tiebreakers, which I think is quite the accomplishment.
Yeah, that definitely shows exactly how exciting this World Cup can be with all of these teams. You know, every single bracket, every single group has had a different outcome, so it's really nice to see this three-way tie in a four-group team. You know, this isn't something that can happen with those three-group teams really as much, and you see it more now. So this is going to be a really interesting way to see exactly how the matches break up, because now it goes into that individual tiebreaker of who won the most games, like most sets between games, you know. So like you said, there were a lot of 2-0s from Japan, which is something very important to pay attention to. You know, so it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this turns out here for them. I'm sure they're crunching the numbers behind the scenes right now, so that is something that's really exciting. So Sweden, actually, I just got the notification from David. Sweden are out in third place, so it was a valiant try right there from Victor, but that does mean that Sweden's tournament dreams have officially been put out here. I can keep making fire jokes all day. I remember, I haven't forgotten about my fire alarm going off at the start of this match. It does feel like forever ago now. But again, a really great job by Sweden, still showing exactly how good, you know, those standardization teams can be. But Landorus Incarnate especially if you know exactly what Pokemon is the antithesis of the team that you're playing against and what you need to make stick around. So an absolutely awesome job by Victor there.
Yeah, and it's definitely a tough Pokemon to bring, because if you're running against a Kyogre team, for example, you know, Landorus Incarnate really doesn't appreciate that. But the benefit about these kind of team tournaments where you see what people are running week over week is that you can kind of look at their past picks and then make Pokemon calls or make strategy calls based off of what you assume your opponent is comfortable with. I'm not necessarily sure that came into play here. You know, I'm not the South Korean team. I can't really tell you, or excuse me, I'm not the Sweden team. I can't really tell you why Victor decided to bring Landorus into this game, but really important to keep in mind, just like strategic wise in these tournaments. But, you know, congratulations to South Korea and to Singapore for moving on. Congratulations for Sweden for going out with a bang, so to speak. That was a really fun set.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a very fun set. We will be taking a short break, and we will be back with the final match of the day. I do want to say also, at the very end of this final match, there is going to be a special announcement, so I do want you guys to stick around for that. Other than that, though, we will be back with that last match, which I am excited for you to be casting, Gabby, because this is a match you've technically casted before. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.